Let me start with a confession. Most of what we call productivity is nonsense. We make lists. Long ones. Beautiful ones. Color-coded even. And at the end of the day, we feel exhausted, yet nothing important actually moved. That's not productivity. That's motion without progress. So let's strip this thing down to the bones. Productivity is not about doing more things. It's about doing the right thing and then actually finishing it. Sounds obvious. Almost insulting. But that's usually where the truth lives. Here's the first uncomfortable idea. Your brain hates confusion more than hard work. When you sit down to work and you're not clear about what you're trying to do, your brain rebels. It checks email, it scrolls, it suddenly remembers you need to reorganize your desk. That's not laziness, that's self-defense. So the trick is simple. Before you start, ask one question. What problem am I actually solving right now? Not I'm working on my project. That's vague. Your brain can't grab it. Instead, I'm writing the introduction. I'm solving this one equation. I'm outlining 3 ideas. Small, sharp, concrete. Once your brain sees a clear target, it relaxes. And relaxed brains work frighteningly fast. Now here's the second idea, and this one feels illegal. Stop respecting tasks you don't understand. Most people treat work like sacred scripture. They follow instructions they don't believe in, don't question and don't understand. That's a terrible way to work. If you don't understand why a task matters, your brain will resist it every time, quietly, invisibly, relentlessly. So instead of forcing discipline, try curiosity. Ask, why does this need to be done? What happens if it's done badly? What's the simplest version that still works? The moment you understand the logic of the task, effort drops dramatically. Understanding is a productivity drug, and it's legal everywhere. Third idea, work expands to fill the nonsense you allow around it. If you allow notifications, interruptions, and constant context switching, your work will stretch, slow, and fracture. Deep work isn't about intensity, it's about protection. Protect one block of time, not all day, just one. No messages, no tabs, no audience. And here's the key, don't try to work longer. Work cleaner. 30 minutes of undisturbed thinking beats 3 hours of distracted effort. Every time. Now let's talk about motivation, because people love that word. Motivation is unreliable. It shows up late, leaves early, and never answers emails. So forget motivation. Instead, build momentum. Momentum comes from finishing small things. When you finish something, your brain releases a quiet signal that says, oh, we're the kind of person who finishes. That signal is powerful. So lower the bar for starting, but raise the bar for finishing. Don't aim to work for 5 hours. Aim to finish one meaningful piece. Finish creates energy. Energy creates speed. Speed looks like productivity so high it alarms people. Another uncomfortable truth. Being busy is often a way to avoid thinking. Thinking is hard, really hard. It's much easier to respond to messages, attend meetings, or tweak details that don't matter. But real productivity comes from sitting still long enough to ask, what actually matters here? What can I safely ignore? What single action would make the rest easier? That kind of thinking feels slow, but it saves enormous time later. Finally, the most illegal trick of all, stop trying to look productive. Looking productive is a performance. Being productive is private. The moment you stop optimizing for appearances, speed, hustle, visible busyness, you gain something rare, mental freedom, and with that freedom you start choosing work that actually moves the needle. When that happens, something strange occurs. You work less, you finish more. And people start asking how you get so much done. The answer is boring, and that's the best part. You think clearly, you cut nonsense, you finish things. That's it. No secret system, no heroic discipline, just honest thinking applied consistently. And once you do that, productivity doesn't feel impressive anymore. It feels almost unfair, like you found a loophole, like it should be illegal. Most people believe productivity means doing a lot of things. Filling the day with tasks, meetings, messages, and checklists feels satisfying, almost responsible. At night, you can point to a long list and say, I was busy all day. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Busyness is cheap. It's easy to stay busy. It's much harder to actually finish something that matters. Real productivity has nothing to do with how many tasks you touch. It has everything to do with what changes because of your work. If nothing meaningful is different at the end of the day, then no matter how tired you feel, you weren't productive. You were just occupied. The problem starts with how we define work. We treat all tasks as equal. Answering an email feels like progress. Updating a document feels like progress. Attending a meeting feels like progress. But most of these activities don't move anything forward. They maintain the status quo. They create motion, not results. Finishing is different. Finishing creates something that didn't exist before. A completed page, a solved problem, a clear decision. Finishing forces clarity, commitment, and responsibility. That's why the brain quietly avoids it. Finishing exposes your thinking. It makes your work real, and real work can be judged. So instead of asking, what do I need to do today? A better question is, what must be finished for today to count? That single shift changes everything. It cuts through noise. It forces prioritization. Suddenly, 10 tasks shrink into 1 or 2 that actually matter. There's a strange relief in this approach. When you stop trying to do everything, you free yourself to do something well. You're no longer juggling dozens of half-started efforts that drain your attention. Your mind settles because it knows what winning looks like. One finished thing. That's the target. This also explains why many people feel exhausted but unsatisfied. They spend the day starting things, switching between them, and leaving each one incomplete. Every unfinished task leaves a small mental residue, a sense of, I should get back to that. Multiply that by 20, and your mind is cluttered and tired before the real work even begins. Finishing removes that weight. Completion closes loops. It clears mental space. And once you experience that relief, something interesting happens. You want more of it. Momentum builds naturally, not from pressure, but from progress. This doesn't mean you ignore everything else. It means you stop pretending everything is equally important. Some tasks support the work, some distract from it, some can wait, and some don't matter at all. Productivity isn't about being fair to every task. It's about being honest about impact. There's also a hidden confidence that comes from finishing meaningful work. You stop measuring yourself by effort and start measuring yourself by outcomes. You trust yourself more because you can point to completed results, not intentions. That confidence quietly improves the quality of your decisions and the speed at which you make them. The most productive people aren't frantic. They're selective. They choose fewer things and then they see them through to the end. That selectiveness looks slow at first. It can even look lazy from the outside. But over time, the results compound. Finished work stacks. Unfinished work evaporates. So if you want to feel truly productive, stop chasing volume. Stop counting hours. Stop worshiping full calendars. Choose one thing that matters. Make it small enough to finish, and then finish it completely. Do that consistently, and something shifts. You'll do less, but what you do will count. And that's what real productivity has been about all along. Most people believe productivity is a matter of discipline. They think the problem is a lack of willpower, focus, or motivation, so they try to fix it by pushing harder. They wake up earlier, force themselves to sit longer, and shame themselves when they feel resistance. But resistance is not a character flaw. It's usually a signal. And more often than not, it's a signal that you don't actually understand what you're trying to do. A confused mind does not cooperate. When the goal is vague, the brain can't form a clear plan, and without a plan, it looks for escape. That escape shows up as distraction. Suddenly, checking messages feels urgent. Cleaning the desk feels necessary. Even doing unrelated useful tasks feels better than facing unclear work. This is not procrastination in the usual sense. It's the brain protecting itself from uncertainty. Clarity changes that instantly. The moment a task becomes specific, the mind relaxes. There's a clear beginning, a clear end, and a sense of direction. Instead of work on the project, you now have write the first 3 paragraphs or solve this one problem. That clarity removes friction before discipline is even needed. This is why clarity beats discipline every time. Discipline is a blunt tool. It forces movement, but it doesn't guarantee direction. You can be extremely disciplined and still work on the wrong thing or work in circles. Clarity, on the other hand, quietly pulls you forward. When you know exactly what you're trying to accomplish, effort feels lighter, almost automatic. A clear task also gives your brain permission to start imperfectly. Vague goals invite perfectionism because the standard is undefined. When the task is specific, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to complete the next visible step. That makes starting easier and finishing more likely. Another hidden benefit of clarity is decision reduction. When your goal is unclear, every action requires a decision. Should I do this now? Is this important? Am I doing it right? Those decisions drain energy quickly. With a clear objective, many of those decisions disappear. You simply follow the path that leads to the outcome. This is why experienced problem solvers spend so much time defining the problem before working on it. They know that a well-defined problem is already half solved. Once the shape of the problem is clear, the solution often reveals itself with surprisingly little effort. Clarity also creates focus without force. Instead of constantly reminding yourself to concentrate, the task itself holds your attention. There's something compelling about a clear challenge. The mind wants to resolve it. Confusion repels attention. Clarity attracts it. Many people try to compensate for a lack of clarity by increasing pressure. Deadlines, timers, productivity systems, and guilt become substitutes for understanding. Sometimes they work in the short term, but they're fragile. The moment the pressure is gone, progress collapses. Clarity, however, lasts. Once you understand what you're doing and why, you can return to the work easily, even after interruptions. This approach also makes rest more effective. When you stop working with clarity, you know exactly where to resume. There's no anxiety about forgetting, something, or losing momentum. Your mind can actually rest because the work is contained, not sprawling. If you want to be more productive, don't start by asking how to work harder. Start by asking how to make the work clearer. Define the outcome. Shrink the task until it's concrete. Remove ambiguity wherever you can. Most resistance will disappear on its own. In the end, discipline should support clarity, not replace it. When you know exactly what you're doing, you don't need to fight yourself to do it. The work pulls you in step by step, and progress feels less like effort and more like momentum. A lot of resistance at work doesn't come from laziness or lack of discipline. It comes from something much simpler and more uncomfortable, not really understanding what you're being asked to do. When a task feels heavy, slow, or endlessly postponed, it's often because it doesn't make sense yet. The mind doesn't like investing energy in something that feels arbitrary, fragile, or pointless. When you don't understand the why behind a task, your brain treats it like a threat. Not a dramatic one, but a subtle one. It doesn't know what success looks like, what failure costs, or how much effort is reasonable. So it hesitates, it delays, it quietly pushes back. You might sit at your desk, technically working, but mentally you're elsewhere. That's not defiance, it's confusion. The moment you understand why something matters, that resistance fades. Purpose acts like lubrication. Suddenly the task has a direction, a reason to exist. You're no longer pushing a rock for no reason. You're moving something toward a result that makes sense. This is why people can work incredibly hard. R&D on things they care about, even when those things are difficult. Difficulty alone isn't the problem. Meaningless difficulty is. When effort connects to understanding, it becomes tolerable, sometimes even enjoyable. Understanding also gives you the power to simplify. If you don't know why a task exists, you follow it blindly, step by step, afraid to change anything. But when you understand the goal, you can question the process. You can ask whether every step is necessary or whether there's a faster, cleaner way to get the same result. That's where efficiency is born, not from speed, but from insight. Many people struggle with productivity because they inherit tasks instead of choosing them. Instructions are passed down, systems are copied, and expectations are followed without examination. Over time, the work becomes bloated. Extra steps pile up. Nobody remembers why things are done a certain way, only that they are. The cost of this confusion shows up as fatigue, procrastination, and disengagement. Asking why cuts through that fog. Why does this report exist? Who uses it? What decision depends on it? What happens if it's late or imperfect? These questions don't slow work down, they sharpen it. They turn vague obligation into a concrete problem that can be solved. Understanding also reduces fear. A task you don't understand feels risky. You don't know what's expected, so you imagine everything that could go wrong. That fear makes you cautious, slow, and hesitant. But once you understand the criteria for success, the fear collapses. You know what matters and what doesn't. You can stop overworking irrelevant details and focus on what actually counts. There's also a quiet confidence that comes from understanding your work. You're no longer just executing instructions. You're participating in the logic of the task. That confidence makes it easier to make decisions, to explain your choices, and to adjust when things change. You're not dependent on constant guidance because you understand the underlying purpose. This doesn't mean questioning everything endlessly. It means refusing to work blindly. Even a few minutes of clarification can save hours of wasted effort later. The time invested in understanding pays for itself many times over. When productivity feels hard, the solution is rarely more force. Force creates short bursts of activity, but it doesn't last. Understanding, on the other hand, creates alignment. Your effort and the task move in the same direction. Once that alignment exists, work stops feeling like something you have to push through. It becomes something you can move through, steadily and with less friction. The task doesn't shrink, but the resistance does. And in that reduction of resistance, productivity quietly improves without drama, without burnout, and without struggle. People often imagine deep work as something intense and dramatic. They picture long hours, heroic concentration, and mental strain that leaves you exhausted at the end of the day. But deep work isn't about suffering. It's about protection. The real enemy of meaningful work isn't difficulty, it's interruption. Every time your attention is pulled away, your mind pays a tax. It has to remember where it was, what it was doing, and why it mattered. That cost is invisible, but it adds up quickly. A few messages, a quick glance at a notification, a short interruption that only takes a minute can quietly destroy the flow of thought that real work depends on. The problem is not that distractions exist. The problem is that we treat them as harmless. We assume we can just jump back in. But the mind doesn't work like that. Deep thinking requires continuity. It needs time to build momentum, to explore ideas, to test and discard possibilities. Interruptions reset that process over and over again. Protection is the solution, not intensity, not willpower, not heroic effort. Protection. This means deliberately creating a space where your attention is safe for a short period of time. It doesn't have to be hours. Even a small, well-protected block of time can produce surprisingly large results. When distractions are removed, something interesting happens. Work that once felt heavy becomes lighter. Problems that seemed complicated begin to untangle themselves. This isn't because you're trying harder. It's because your mind is finally allowed to finish a thought. Many people try to compensate for interruptions by working longer. They stretch the day, stay up late, or multitask more aggressively. This feels productive, but it's a trap. Longer hours with fractured attention produce worse results and more fatigue. Clean work, even in short bursts, is far more effective. Protection also changes how you relate to time. Instead of measuring productivity by hours spent, you begin measuring it by quality of attention. 30 minutes of uninterrupted focus can outperform 3 hours of scattered effort. Once you experience that contrast, it becomes obvious how wasteful constant distraction really is. There's also a psychological benefit to protected work. When you know a block of time is safe, your mind relaxes. You're not half working while waiting for the next interruption. You're fully present. That presence is what allows deeper insights to surface. Ideas connect. Patterns emerge. Solutions appear that wouldn't show up in a distracted state. Protecting your work doesn't mean isolating yourself forever. It means being intentional. You decide when you're available and when you're not. You create boundaries around the moments that matter most. That act of choosing is powerful. It signals to your brain that this work is important and worth attention. This approach also reduces burnout. Constant interruption keeps your mind in a reactive state. You're always responding, adjusting, and switching contexts. That's exhausting. Protected work allows your mind to settle into a single direction. Even though the work may be challenging, it's less draining because it's coherent. Another overlooked benefit of protection is speed. When your attention is in being reset repeatedly, progress accelerates naturally. You don't need tricks or hacks. You simply stop losing time to recovery. The minutes you save add up quickly, creating a sense of momentum that feels almost unfair. Deep work, then, isn't about being extreme. It's about being deliberate. You don't need to dominate your entire schedule. You just need to guard a small portion of it with care. Turn off what doesn't matter. Delay what can wait. Give your mind a chance to work without interference. When you do that, productivity stops feeling like a battle. You're not fighting distraction all day long. You've already removed it. What remains is focused effort, applied cleanly, and finished faster than you expected. And that's the quiet power of protection. Momentum is one of the most misunderstood forces in productivity. People think it comes from motivation, inspiration, or sudden bursts of energy. They wait to feel ready before they start. But momentum doesn't work that way. Momentum is not something you wait for. It's something you create, and it almost always begins with finishing something small. The human mind is deeply affected by incomplete work. Every unfinished task lingers quietly in the background, creating mental noise. It's not loud enough to notice directly, but it drains attention and energy over time. When too many things are left open, the mind becomes cluttered, restless, and unfocused. Starting new work feels heavier because you're already carrying the weight of what hasn't been finished. Finishing changes that immediately. Completion closes a loop. It tells the brain, this is done. You can let it go. That release creates a small but noticeable sense of relief. And that relief is powerful. It frees up mental space and creates a subtle desire to experience that feeling again. This is how momentum begins, not with big wins, but with small, definite completions. When you finish something, even something modest, your brain updates its self-image. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is always working and start seeing yourself as someone who completes. That shift matters more than people realize. Identity drives behavior. Once your brain accepts that finishing is what you do, starting the next task becomes easier. This is why lowering the bar for starting is so effective. Instead of aiming for a massive outcome, you aim for a small, finishable piece. One paragraph, one problem, one decision. The goal is not to impress anyone. The goal is to complete. Many people sabotage momentum by setting goals that are too large. They plan to work for hours, to complete an entire project, or to solve everything at once. When reality doesn't match that ambition, frustration sets in. The work feels endless, and momentum never has a chance to form. Small finishes avoid this trap. They create frequent signals of progress. Each completion reinforces the last one. Before long, you're moving faster. Not because you're forcing yourself, but because the path forward feels natural. Momentum also reduces the need for constant motivation. When progress is visible, motivation becomes a byproduct instead of a requirement. You don't need to convince yourself to keep going. The act of moving forward does that for you. There's also a compounding effect. Small finishes often reveal the next step automatically. Once one piece is done, the next becomes clearer. Confusion decreases. Decisions become simpler. What once felt like a complex task turns into a sequence of manageable actions. Finishing small things also builds trust with yourself. You stop making promises you can't keep. Instead of planning unrealistically, you act realistically. Over time, this creates confidence, not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that comes from reliability. This doesn't mean avoiding big goals. It means breaking them down until progress is unavoidable. Big goals are achieved through a chain of small completions, not heroic bursts of effort. Momentum thrives on continuity, not intensity. Another important aspect of momentum is rhythm. When you finish something, you create a natural pause. That pause allows you to choose the next action deliberately instead of reactively. You're no longer scrambling, you're steering. As momentum builds, productivity starts to feel lighter. You're not dragging yourself forward, you're being pulled. The work flows because resistance is low and direction is clear. In the end, the secret isn't working harder or longer. It's finishing more often. Small finishes, repeated consistently, create a powerful force. Once that force exists, progress accelerates on its own. Momentum isn't loud, it doesn't announce itself. But when it's there, everything moves faster, and you barely notice how much ground you're covering until you look back and see how far you've gone. Most people don't struggle with productivity because they aren't working. They struggle because they are performing. They're trying to look productive. To others, to systems, sometimes even to themselves. Calendars are packed, messages are answered quickly, and activity is constant. From the outside, it looks impressive. From the inside, it feels strangely empty. Performative productivity is about visibility. It rewards what can be seen, responsiveness, busyness, motion. Real productivity is quieter. It often looks slow. Sometimes it looks like doing nothing at all because the most important work is happening in your head. When you optimize for appearances, your choices change. You choose tasks that are easy to show rather than tasks that actually matter. You respond quickly instead of thinking deeply. You start things because starting is visible, even if finishing is hard. Over time, this creates a gap between effort and impact. The problem is that performance feels productive in the moment. There's immediate feedback, a message sent, a meeting attended, a task checked off. But those signals are misleading. They measure activity, not progress, and activity without progress is a dead end. Real productivity requires a different orientation. It requires privacy. Not secrecy, but freedom from constant observation. When you know you're not being watched or evaluated every minute, your mind is free to take the time it needs. You can think, revise, and explore without rushing to show results prematurely. This is why some of the most important work happens away from dashboards and notifications. Insight doesn't arrive on schedule. Understanding can't be forced to perform. It needs space to develop. When you stop trying to look productive, you also stop lying to yourself about what matters. You begin to notice which tasks actually change outcomes and which ones just create noise. This honesty can be uncomfortable at first. It means admitting that some of what you've been doing doesn't really count. But that discomfort is productive. It clears the way for better decisions. Another cost of performative productivity is fragmentation. When you're constantly reacting to external signals, your attention breaks into pieces. You're never fully with the work. Even when you sit down to focus, part of your mind is still tuned to the possibility of interruption. That split attention weakens thinking and slows progress. Quiet productivity does the opposite. It brings your attention into one place. It allows ideas to connect and develop. It doesn't rush for immediate output. It values results over responsiveness. There's also a long-term cost to performance, burnout. Constant visibility creates pressure to always appear active. Rest feels suspicious. Thinking feels unproductive. Over time, this erodes motivation and creativity. You're always on, but rarely effective. Letting go of performance creates relief. You no longer need to justify every minute. You can work in cycles of intensity and rest. You can disappear briefly to solve a real problem and return with something finished. That rhythm is sustainable. This doesn't mean ignoring responsibilities or communication. It means choosing when and how you engage. You stop letting interruptions dictate your priorities. Instead, you decide what deserves your best attention and protect it. When real productivity replaces performance, something interesting happens. Results become clearer. Progress becomes tangible. You don't need to advertise your effort because the outcome speaks for itself. People may not always see how you work, but they will see what you produce. Finished work has a weight that activity does not. It accumulates. It builds trust. It creates opportunities. In the end, productivity isn't about being seen doing things. It's about making things happen. That shift from performance to practice is subtle, but it changes everything. When you stop trying to look productive and start focusing on results, work becomes simpler, calmer, and far more effective. And that quiet effectiveness is what real productivity looks like.